Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend.
Good day there, mate.
Oh, man. God.
I'm practicing.
You're just terrible. Okay. Yeah. Although I think when we do finally get a chance to go together to Australia, we got to talk like that the entire time. Do you think they'd be able to, like, you think they'd be able to tell we weren't really from there? No way.
Not a chance. We're as good as Aussies.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad. A podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. We are your hosts, Woody Brown
and Tyler Bentz.
What's up, bro?
It was a tough one, wasn't it?
Boy, howdy, man.
You pulled an old Tyler on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be a lot of editing on that intro.
Oh, goodness.
Good news, I don't got COVID anymore, but bad news, I still feel dumb as hell from the brain fog. So,
oh, man, it's the worst, dude.
It's just, you just don't feel like sharp at all. It's,
you definitely, you kind of always do.
Here we go. Here we go. I knew it was coming.
Real quick, before we get started on this week's episode, dude, there's a couple, last week I misspoke, man. I need to make a correction. This is, look, I don't pretend that we're perfect here. In fact, I kind of like the fact that we're imperfect. Mm-hmm. But when I notice a mistake, I got to speak up.
See something, say something.
Exactly. It wasn't Dan's character who has some sort of magical gas. It's actually your character. And folks, I realized too that I didn't really dive into it too heavy, but I'm talking about some Dungeons and Dragons characters that our buddy Dan and Tyler created for this.
Did you just hear that, Woody?
What?
We lost like 20 listeners.
Well, they'll come back. Anyway, I figured that I just needed to make that correction. So,
Wait, what kind of gas do I have?
It's like hot gas, man. It's awesome.
What? Because I thought you were talking about like something related to his like giant plague doctor.
Okay, I didn't know where you were going on that one.
But
yeah, man, your power is called poison spray.
Oh, yeah.
Which is totally the mad gasser.
Yeah, you're exactly right. What is the... Is it like... It's like an... I haven't even used it yet.
End of the story. Moving on. As we get into this week's episode, Tyler, you mentioned last week that this one kind of closely reminded you of what we talked about last week, the mad gasser of Mattoon, which, if you listen to last week's episode, you know that occurred in 1944 in Mattoon, Illinois, which we've now discovered to be basically the bagel capital of the world.
Who knew?
Man, super interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when we were kind of discussing episodes and sort of brainstorming some of the things that we wanted to talk about this year and this season, Mad Gasser of Mattoon, such an interesting character. But this one, I had, of course, heard of it. But I got to be honest with you, I know almost nothing about it. And I kept it that way because I want you to tell me about it, like our old conversations would go right here on the podcast. Now, I will say something real quick, folks.
Here we go.
I thought this, and you're going to make fun of me. Everybody listening is going to make fun of me. But I'm just going to be honest with you. I thought this was a cryptid. When I first heard of it, I thought that it was. I thought
you may not be too far off, though.
Okay.
Maybe. So what Woody is referring to is we really had to I especially had to be real tight-lipped on last week's episode because the Mad Gasser, as fascinating as it is, really the sort of grandfather of that kind of vibe and character, in my opinion, is the one that we're going to be discussing this week. This is sort of they're definitely related, and I can't wait to kind of talk about the similarities and some of the connective tissue between the two, but they definitely both have like a very, very similar sort of vibe and both equally unexplained.
Yeah.
So let's rewind all the way back to 1837.
Man, All the way back to 1837.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Before Jack the Ripper began his reign of terror, there was another mysterious entity terrorizing the streets of London. His, or its name, was Spring-Heeled Jack.
Yes.
Spring-Heeled Jack, sometimes spelt as Spring-Heeled, Spring-Heel, is a famous boogeyman from British folklore dubbed the Terror of London, who is the most renowned for and named after its reported ability to jump incredible heights and distances with absolute ease. The first reported sighting comes from 1837, although reports of similar phantoms date back as early as 1803.
What?
When Mary Stevens, a serving girl, which, by the way, there's also another character called Stingy Jack.
Okay.
Who is another sort of specter from Irish folklore. So I wonder...
His superpower is just be like, that sounds a little expensive.
Yeah, he's just like really, really good at budgeting. but he has claws.
Yeah, it was 1803. He made the very first spreadsheet.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When Mary Stevens, a serving girl walking home through the streets of London one night, was attacked by a horrific specter that she claimed jumped out of a dark alley, forcefully kissed her, and ripped her clothes before scarpering, I don't know what that means, when her screams attracted the neighborhood's attention. The next day, a short way away, a figure jumped in front of a passing coach, causing its driver to lose control and crash, with the witnesses claiming that the entity then casually escaped by jumping over a 9-foot fence whilst emitting a high-pitched laugh.
Oh my gosh, dude. That is terrifying, man.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we'll get into this later, but just that alone, like the similarities between like a villain, like just like the Mad Gasser. I mean, it's like, it writes itself.
Yeah. No kidding.
The attacker was dubbed Spring-Heeled Jack by the newspapers, and the legend was born. Since then, there have been multiple sightings, the last official sighting being in 1907, but some claim as recently as 2008. While most commonly seen in London, reports of Spring-Heeled Jack range from Britain, including Middlesbrough, Liverpool, and Lincolnshire, and even as far north as parts of Scotland. Descriptions differ, but the spectre is generally described as being a tall, thin figure in a long black coat, with clawed hands and eyes that resemble red balls of fire. In some cases, he's described as seeming gentlemanly from a distance, but possessing a devil-like face, which, yikes. In others, he's described as wearing a helmet and an otter skin-looking cloak. Some versions go as far as to portray him as possessing demonic traits or being clearly inhuman. Many versions also depict him being capable of breathing blue or white flames.
Jeez.
You see that blue flame again?
Mm-hmm.
While generally silent, some reports describe Jack as being able to speak English as well. Modern theories on who or what Jack actually was vary, from a pure urban legend with no backing in reality to a malicious prankster using some kind of stage equipment to pull off apparently supernatural feats, possibly also with some press or rumor-driven exaggeration, which, I mean, I'm sure...
Hold on a second here.
What?
So I'm supposed to believe that in 1836, this guy's jumping 9 feet with stage equipment?
Yeah, well, even your debunkers were alive and well back then. To claims that he was some sort of cryptid supernatural entity or even alien. So see?
All right, man.
You weren't too far off.
I'm still part of the club, right, guys?
Mm-hmm. Due to his hideous appearance and unique attributes, Spring-Heeled Jack became a highly popular figure in fiction, often being the subject of Victorian penny dreadfuls. While his literary status has deteriorated since the turn of the 19th century, Spring-Heeled Jack remains a prominent figure in the media. While traditionally a villainous figure, as early as within 20 years of the legend's appearance, more complex or sympathetic depictions of Jack appeared. By contrast, some versions go in the opposite direction. While historically there are no reports or legends of Spring-Heeled Jack being responsible for killing anyone per se, it's not uncommon for adaptations to present him as murderous and potentially even linked to Victorian London's other infamous Jack the Ripper, which wouldn't come around until much later, back in 1888. So we got a few years.
Wow, dude. I I mean, I feel like there's a lot to unpack there.
A lot to unpack. I mean, I have it broken down now into like some of the more important kind of cases or accounts.
Okay.
You know, you want to hit those, or do you want to dive in?
Well, first, let me just my initial thoughts before, like, just again, man, I on purpose kind of kept it a little bit, or I kept myself pretty darn ignorant to this whole case and phenomenon stuff. Because I kind of wanted to just like the listener is doing right now, sort of just like hear it for the first time and just like let my imagination run wild. And doing so, man, I don't know. That's crazy. So like potentially as early as 1803, but certainly by 1837, this is happening in London, right?
Originally, it was sort of the suburbs.
Like outskirts, okay.
Yeah. But then it kind of spread, which... Again, the debunkers would say, "Oh, it's just a bunch of copycats,"
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then, as late as 2008,
yeah, which I'm not totally. So I didn't get into a lot of that because I don't feel. And again, this is just sort of a disclaimer. Like, there's even some accounts of, well, what's kind of cool is we're from Georgia, and we live in Georgia, and there's even an account back in like 1944, I believe, where this farmer basically saw this character who was 6 to 8 foot tall. He had a cloak and he had eyes that looked like little red fireballs. And then as he came close, he blew blue flames.
But no jumping. Did he jump?
Well, this is what's interesting. So then the farmer, I mean, he is in Georgia, popped that shotgun out and shot him. And when he did that, this character laughed. And it's not really clear if he like hopped away, but it just said, he fled. So I mean, I get it as far as like the, eyes kind of like fireballs and the laugh, which, I mean, I guess that is kind of, one of his attributes. But I don't know. I feel like, to me, Spring Heel Jack is very sort of
British,
London's own. Yeah, kind of. He sort of belongs to that area.
By the way, Scarper or scarpering just means to run away. And I got to say something real quick about that. I'm just gonna like break off on a little tangent here. Ann and I were talking about this the other day. Sometimes there's just too many words in the English language. They just need to be just like forgotten. Okay. Now it's either run away or escaped,
flee.
Or I guess. Yeah. I mean, like that's what I'm saying. There's a bunch of different ways to say the same thing. So. But I don't know. Now that I say it out loud, it's like I kind of want to be like, well, I don't know, man. They just kind of scarpered out. And somebody's like, wait, what do you... Anyway, just in case our listeners wanted to know what scarpering meant, there you go.
I did not know, so
well, now you know. Yeah, let's dig into some of these cases because I kind of want to like hear some more details besides the one about, I guess, the serving girl. Okay.
Well, let me kind of get into that a little bit more. So this is the very first recorded sighting.
It's interesting to me that like one of the first things that they say about, or like what the details about that first case is like this dark figure comes out of the alley while this girl, I just assume, is kind of like walking home late from her shift or whatever, and it just like rips her clothes and tries to kiss her. Yeah. Boy.
Well, that's one thing too that we'll see also is the majority of all of these cases are kind of associated with young women.
Oh man,
which is again even adds more sort of leans in even to the villainous kind of character. So the very first recorded sighting was the servant girl named Mary Stevens, reported walking to Lavender Hill when a figure leaped out at her, grabbed her, and scratching her with his claws. Her screams drew the attention of a passerby who searched for the assailant but was never able to locate him.
Wow. Now, did she also see, this is also the first time that she sees it leap? Like
yes.
9 feet? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't think she says 9 feet, but I think she just talks about it like leaping away.
Okay.
Following this first account, several other young women reported similar sightings throughout suburban London. According to earlier reports, the attacker was described as a shape-shifting figure, ghostly in appearance, and always with gloves in the shape of claws.
Weird, man.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. So now I'm thinking like, Is it a skinwalker? Is it some sort of, where, what is it? What
like,
is it? Not where, like.
You thinking Wendigo?
No, God, there's a freaking category in Dungeons and Dragons, dude, that's like, it's not folk, but it's like that, it's like beasts, it's like you either turn into like a bear or a wolf or
Which, it's funny you say that. Let me keep going. Rumors of the strange figure swirled around London for about a year, with the press giving him the nickname Spring-Heeled Jack. The story was not thought to be anything more than exaggerated gossip or ghost stories until an encounter the following year. So this is where it gets a little more, serious, if you will. In February of 1838, a young woman named Jane Alsop claimed that a gentleman wearing a cloak rang her doorbell late at night. He then took off his cloak to reveal tight-fitting clothes that resembled white oilskin. Then he breathed blue flames into her face and began to cut her clothes with his claws. Luckily, Alsop's sister was able to scare the attacker, making him flee from the scene.
Goodness.
A man named Thomas Milbank was arrested and tried for the attack on Jane Alsop. However, due to her insistence that the attacker could breathe fire, he was not convicted.
So they're just like, I just imagine like old school, like English court, right? Everybody's got their like white wig on, and they're like, demanding that he breathes flame in the courtroom, and they're like, and he's like, dude, I don't understand what's happening here. Why? It wasn't me, and I can't breathe flame. They're like, breathe flame, you foul beast, man.
Yeah, it's pretty. What a time to be alive. Just a few days later, a similar account was reported by an 18-year-old woman named Lucy Scales.
Hold a second.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures.
From another dimension, another world, I don't know.
The most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad.
Okay. A few days later from this guy being released, or a few days later from this initial...
Well, that other account of...
I just wanted to clarify.
Jane Alsop, yeah.
Because then I was like, holy crap, this guy's on the loose.
Yeah,
and he did it again.
She was out walking with her sister in Limehouse when a figure leaped at her from an alley and blew flames into her face, leaving her in a state of hysterics. The attacker left the scene and was never found, though several men were brought in for questioning. Following the accounts of Jane Alsop and Lucy Scales, Spring-Heeled Jack sightings were reported all around England, even reaching parts of Scotland, like I said earlier. His victims were most commonly described as young women, and they all described similar accounts of a mysterious man in thin, tight-fitting clothes, red eyes, and claws for hands.
Weird, man. So weird.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. Especially to think in the 1830s, like this concept of, eyes like fireballs. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's tons and tons. These are sort of the, more, widely known ones. But in the series of appearances, the eyes like fireballs is definitely pretty much on every single one. The claws, some people believe that the claws are, actual clawed hands, while others believe that they're just like gloves with claws built in, which is interesting. He was referred to not only as the Terror of London, which is pretty badass, but he was called a ghost, an imp, a demon, a devil, or some people even claimed that they saw him taking the shape of a large white bull and a large white bear.
Whoa.
Which is sort of a real left turn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a hard left.
Yeah.
Man.
It's funny because a lot of your sort of like, sort of guys that are into like cryptids or cryptozoologists, I guess, technically, they draw comparisons to the Jersey Devil, Mothman. Mothman had like the, blazing red eyes. So there is definitely some sort of commonalities between, that red-eyed kind of thing. And I mean, even,
there's some Bigfoot accounts too, right? Like, I'm thinking of one where...
Oh, yeah. You mean with the red eyes?
Farmer, yeah, the farmer sees these eyes, he shoots at him, and the beast like keeps on coming towards him. There's like a group of them.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also... Actually, you may be thinking about, like, Skinwalker Ranch. There's one where there's like a wolf, and I think it has glowing red eyes, and they, the farmer keeps shooting, and the bullets like bounce off of it. Which a lot of the accounts for this thing are that, like, some people would shoot at it, which, the accuracy of guns back then wasn't the best. But yeah, there were a series of appearances that would also take place at the Aldershot military base, where he would terrify the sentry guards, and that was in 1877. Yeah.
So there's like a long, like either
long one. Yeah.
There's a huge span of time here, and immediately I'm thinking it could be the same person. Let's say this guy initially is in his 20s in like 1830 something, and then in 1877 he would be like 60. So he's like, modern day retirement age, but he still hasn't given up. His technology's maybe improved. Now he's breathing blue fire. Like, is it the same dude or is it not the same dude?
Yeah. And I also think, I don't know if you've read this, but there's probably my favorite Batman story is Paul Pope's Year 100. And he kind of gets into this thing. I mean, it's sort of set in the future, and Batman is no longer Bruce Wayne. But it's cool because it goes through this little montage where you see that, like, the Batman is sort of just like a mantle. And it shows like the Adam West Batman, and then, sort of the Neil Adams Batman. So it's this guy sort of carrying on the mantle of the Batman, like, through all these years. So it really kind of plays up the, the mythology and like the idea that, like, oh, well, he's sort of a monster or some, creature that's like immortal. And like, even in that book, it's really cool because he like puts these like super sharp, like, Japanese Oni mask, like, teeth in to make him look like a beast.
Whoa, yeah.
It's really, really awesome. But yeah, if you're going by the timeline of like, if this is an actual guy, I don't know, I kind of like that mantle idea.
Well, what's kind of cool about all those kind of things, and we sort of touched on this actually back in our Andrew WK episode earlier this season, like creating something that can essentially span throughout time. I think especially characters like Batman, for example, can really kind of do that. That torch can be passed relatively seamlessly, and it kind of seem like that character is quote unquote immortal because it's just passed on to the next person. So, because they're masked and somewhat of a phantom anyway, that's interesting.
Yeah. So after the 1877 accounts, where he was just kind of showing up and, like, scaring the hell out of these sentry guards, which, by the way, seems a little dangerous if you're just random guy.
That's what I'm thinking too, man. Sometimes it's like, because obviously an initial theory for anyone is, oh, well, it's just some dude in a suit, right? And so I think you got to be a certain type of person, number one, to kind of victimize young ladies and that kind of thing. Obviously, you're an asshole, but, to, I guess, mess with a bunch of, like, armed guards.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
And maybe they're just kind of crazy. Maybe that just sort of fits the profile, but I don't know, man. Like, I feel like if it's just like a prank, if you're looking for like more of like a prankster kind of situation or theory, I don't know, man. That's taking it to another level.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is kind of like poetic and kind of like sort of this romanticized sort of concept of this last, basically in 1904 was considered the last confirmed appearance where he was sighted in Liverpool by multiple witnesses that watched as he leaped up and down the street before jumping 30 feet onto the rooftops and bounding away forever.
Weird, man.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, as he did this, he shot out a terrifying high-pitched laugh, which is really cool.
Well, and it's just, man, that is really cool. I don't know, man. This time period, what is that, Victorian? Is that what it's like?
I think it was sort of at the tail end of the Victorian era, yeah. Because it has that like steampunk sort of.
It's just interesting, man. That time period in London to me is kind of fascinating anyway. Same reason why things like Jack the Ripper and I don't know, man. I imagine like what's it called? Sherlock Holmes and that kind of stuff. That time period.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah, Arthur Conan Doyle. That time period is super fascinating to me because it's like it's just on that like cusp of technology improving relatively quickly, you know, but it's still just like slightly behind it. So I just imagine these streets with like gas lamps, you know, flickering at night and like cobblestone roads and like, you know, it's dreary. And then these characters existing in this time period, you know, these cool, you know, detectives and this, you know, interesting and kind of horrific sort of villain character that exists. It's just wild, man. But then like, I also think, you know, there's a lot of like old secret societies and heck, even like fraternities and stuff, fraternal organizations in the U.S. Have their origins around that kind of time period. Yeah. Was it like a group of people who were just terrorizing or, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know if we want to start diving into theories and stuff, but so far, I just find this character to be extremely interesting, man.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, one thing that you said, I'm really glad that you brought up the secret society motif because we mentioned it on the last episode with the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. You know, it did bring to mind like, and this is a topic that we'll really get into because this is a truly, truly, truly fascinating case also, is the Sonora Aero Club. And it's a lot of these, even like sort of around the time of like the airship mysteries. Yeah. And that would have been around the same time. It was like right at the end of the 1800s.
So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, man.
Yeah. One thing that the debunkers always kind of lean into is, he would have had to have like springs on his feet. And it's just like,
hey, man, have you guys ever watched the Mario Brothers movie? Okay.
Yeah. It just doesn't. And also, like you were saying, you know, it's like there is this rise of technology, but it is still somewhat like primitive. So it's like there's nothing like sleek or
right. They would be like the size
small.
of a Volkswagen Bug,
right?
on each
Exactly.
leg.
Yeah, and it's like even anything that was sort of like propelled or anything like that was based on like, you know, steam technology or like hydraulic lifts and that kind of thing. So it's like nothing really adds up, especially like to jump like 9 feet. And then the last one, him jumping 30 feet up onto a rooftop.
And just like bounding from building to building.
Yeah, like it was nothing and just laughing into the night, you know.
I mean, I got to say though, like I have this like, you know, this funny like idea in my head that it's just this dude who isn't a villain at all, but he's like, he put on this costume, can't figure out how to get it off. And he's like knocking on this lady's door. He's like, hey, can you help? It's like Edward Scissorhands, you know?
Yeah,
like
right.
where he's just like, and he's like fumbling all over himself, accidentally cutting. And then like his something malfunctioned now, like it's leaking and it's like this blue flame coming out. And the whole time he's just trying to communicate.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's funny you say that because there was a case and it may have been, I can't remember. It may have been one of the women that I was talking about. But there is a case where he shows up ringing on the doorbell and the woman comes to the door and he's like yelling like, oh, they've caught him. They've caught Spring Hill Jack. And I think he even says, I need a candle or I need a light or something. So she goes back in, brings like a little like the Ebenezer Scrooge hand candle, hands it to him, or she like holds it out to him, and he basically takes off his cloak, and it reveals that like it's him.
Oh man! Is there a movie? Like, why is there not a movie about this?
Well, apparently he's in a ton of stuff, but I think in sort of the modern lexicon, he's kind of disappeared a little bit.
Sounds like we got a job on our hands, folks.
Well, that leads me to the next thing, and this is an article from comicbook.com. I knew it as soon as I started reading. I was like, okay, this makes perfect sense. But the article is titled, "Was Batman Inspired by Spring Hill Jack?" And it says, Batman is celebrating his 75th anniversary, and IO9 is delving into the character's origin and creation. The website ran an article about Batman's controversial creation in comics, which, by the way, if you haven't seen the documentary Batman and Bill, I think it's on Hulu still. I've
very important to watch.
I've probably seen it more than any other documentary, and I cry every single time. But it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Anyway, Batman's controversial creation in comics and how Bill Finger should be credited as the character's co-creator. In the comments to that post, a reader mentions how Batman owes a debt to the Victorian era British character of urban legend turned penny dreadful hero Spring Hill Jack. The commenter, Michael Monroe, had this to say: "In my honest opinion, Batman owes a great, unacknowledged debt to Spring Hill Jack, who transitioned from London urban myth 1830s to melodrama anti-hero 1870s to prototype superhero 1880s to early 1900s. As written by penny dreadful author Alfred Barrage, Spring Hill Jack was a wealthy aristocrat who assumed the disguise of a devilish bat-winged avenger of the night, maintained a secret underground lair, and used his athletic and technological skills to battle evildoers." Sound familiar? Basically, the collection of story motifs centered around a wealthy protagonist who assumes a heroic, masked secret identity dates back to Spring Hill Jack in the late 19th and very early 20th centuries. By the time Batman was created, these motifs had already been elaborated in pulp novels, most famously by Johnston McCulley's Zorro character and by Russell Thorndyke's Scarecrow stories, to the point that they were part of the zeitgeist. Batman was just the most influential comic book manifestation of those themes.
Yeah.
So I thought that was amazing. Hear that.
For sure, man. I mean, if you really, really think about it too, in a way, and I think Batman Begins does a really good job of kind of, I don't know, explaining this or portraying this in the origins of him developing what will become, Batman or whatever. Like, it kind of shows like the reason why he chose the symbol, and like, striking fear into the hearts of the criminals, and like using it as a symbol. And like, I mean, it's kind of like taking the bad parts of Spring Hill Jack and then using them for good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is though, is like, unlike the Mad Gasser, it's like clawing the women's clothes.
Boy.
And like
cutting them. To go in for a kiss, huh? What a, like.
Yeah, that's where this one, unlike the Mad Gasser, who could have just been some weird dude trying out social experiments. This one is definitely like a little more villainous for sure,
Well, and it reminds me more of like, what is it called? The Batman That Laughs, where it's like kind of like like a Joker Batman.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, it's really a cool thing. And again, there's tons and tons of like these little accounts that, to me, it was harder to find. Apparently, there was a book written in, I think, the early 90s where it was really kind of broken down, and like and again, I'm, stupidly, I don't have all that with me here, but I think he really breaks down a lot more of like the accounts, kind of in a Passport to Magonia, kind of like,
oh wow,
account, kind of deal.
Yeah.
And so it was a little harder for me to find a lot of the ins and outs of those accounts, but like I really do find it fascinating, the shape shifting, and like the, it's like some people say that he was basically had the face of a devil. Other people say he's wearing this like, white helmet with like a white skin tight suit.
Stormtrooper.
Look, sir, droid.
Yeah, Stormtrooper.
He's either Darth Vader or Stormtrooper.
I thought like Tron for some reason too, because of like the little helmet. So I don't know. It's.
I mean, do they say? I imagine they do. In terms of like theories of what's going on here, it seems like it's a prime case for like mass hysteria and stuff. And also like, going back to the fact that it's like mid to late 1800s. If you plopped anybody wearing any kind of costume modern day during that time period, they would immediately be like, it's the devil himself. And I'm not trying to say that this is time travel. I'm actually going to, if you think about it in terms of like interdimensional travel or
like interdimensional
travel, or like even going back to like the simulation theory or something, like if anybody with any sort of modern technology, well, even when electricity was like, quote unquote, invented / more mainstream, like you read the descriptions of people witnessing that for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, hey man, the devil is here and it's the mark of the beast. And so like, and eyewitness accounts, man, are always a little, unreliable in a lot of ways. Like I remember one of the very first sort of podcast phenomenons that I kind of dove into was the Serial podcast where they talked about.
Oh yeah, me too.
What's his name?
Aiden's Saeed.
Yeah, something like that, right? And like they give an incredible example when they're kind of talking about eyewitness accounts. When the narrator kind of asks, "Hey, what did your wife wear 2 days ago?"
Right.
And it's like, I have no clue, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, in those kind of situations, your senses are heightened and details will kind of pop out, but still I think a lot of details will get missed. And so, it could have just been like a crazy, prowl or, attack on this first girl. And in that adrenaline rush and, unfortunate, like sort of victimized mindset, obviously it would have appeared more like a monster. But it's just always interesting to me when it keeps happening and more people see it. And it's like, it's most interesting, actually, I'll say, when there's more than one, right? So there's two witnesses, like when he came to the door.
Oh, yeah. And then the sister.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That has more like gravity to me than just like some person all by themselves walking down a street and, oh, this happened to me,
Yeah, and even like the last, his last sort of official sighting where, there were multiple people in the street that all saw it. And I think that's really cool too, because they were, it was a good time for like all those people to see him jump 30 feet up into the air onto the roof. I mean, I know that you kind of discounted time travel, but
well, I mean, I always counted.
But I mean, boy, if there was any kind of possibility, I think it would be in this because the tech, if you will, I just don't see anything like that existing back in those days.
Yeah, but at the same time, like you said earlier, this is around the same time that the airships and
that's true.
Were going around the world. So maybe there's this like faction of extremely intelligent, science-based organization that has that technology and is just like testing it out and stuff. And I mean, I don't know. It's easy to assume sometimes that everybody's good in an organ, but there's always there's going to be somebody that's evil and that someone's going to use that technology for bad.
Yeah, but it's easier for me to see like this bulky airship. It's easier for me to swallow that instead of like something that's able to like literally propel a guy who's just wearing a cloak and a weird oilskin suit.
It reminds me of that internet clip of the dude that's like, and here we are at San Diego News, and he's like, and it starts like this, and he just like, whoa, poof, right into the water.
Right into the water, yeah.
Dude, I don't know if I've ever laughed so hard in my life.
Yeah, that's a classic.
It's amazing.
It's funny, too, because it's doing that shot where it's like, as soon as he's like, and here we are in Daytona, Florida, or San Diego.
Yeah.
And the camera's like pulling out like it's going to be this big epic scene of him flying up into the air. And it's like, it pulls way far out and he just lands right in the water.
Right on his face.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Poor guy. Hilarious. Boy, I don't know what to think, man. I don't know. I keep on, if I had to like give you one sort of what do you think it is? And I'm only allowed to choose one. I would say it kind of, especially since it's like seen throughout time, or it spans a number of years, I'll say that like, I think it's kind of like a few people.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same dude.
I thought the same thing. Yeah. Like the idea of like passing the mantle.
Yeah.
Kind of on.
It is interesting to me too, man, that, well, one of the things that I was going to say about the 2008 sighting is like, I feel like I would be more sort of like critical of something like that because like the technology is better now. And so for it to have happened back in 1837 or whatever, that to me is more fascinating. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But I say that to say like, boy, we don't really have the same kind of, like we have evil sons of guns in our more modern history, right? But none of them really using like crazy technology like that.
No.
Which is interesting to me. Like, what? I don't know. There's no bad guys like hopping over buildings and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this and the Mad Gasser, I mean, they fit perfect into, 66 Adam West Batman. But yeah, I thought that was fascinating. I've always really loved this story. And again, as frustrating as it is to not really have closure or not really have much of an answer, it does share that with the Mad Gasser. I still think it's one of those things that, the skeptics easily just debunk it and they say, same with the Mad Gasser, but I'm sure it was even more so back then because the majority of the witnesses were women. It was the women who were manhandled and, tearing their clothes with the claws and all that. So like, I'm sure it was like downplayed even more than the Mad Gasser, which, was in the 40s. But there's still, you can't deny that it was like a flap and actually a pretty long flap,
Yeah, man. Like London seemed to be pretty, or like that area seemed to be a pretty dang scary place to be, man. In the 1800s.
Yeah.
Jack the Ripper, Spring-Heeled Jack. I feel bad for anybody born with the name Jack back then because
exactly.
Boy, you just kind of got crapped on, didn't you? I mean, you're either like a crazed evil Batman who likes to rip girls' clothes and try to force a smooch upon a stranger, which is just so creepy and disgusting.
Weird.
Or you're just a murderer.
Yeah. Which I gotta say I don't know. I mean, I don't think that it's. I think that there could be some connectivity between Spring-Heeled Jack and Jack the Ripper. Also, I mean, obviously, Spring-Heeled Jack feels a little more like theatrical with like the laugh and like, not really doing any harm. And then Jack the Ripper obviously was terribly grotesque, massacring these people. But I mean, I think it could. I don't know.
Maybe it inspired Jack the Ripper.
Or inspired, yeah. Right.
I mean, it's just, what an like, I don't know, like I said a million times already, like this time period, that kind of character, a mystery that remains somewhat relatively unsolved is just so fascinating, man. It just makes me want to dig in more, to read more about these kind of cases and stuff.
Yeah. And again, for you folks out there that are interested and kind of want to follow up and delve a little deeper into it, there are a lot of accounts, but like I said at the top of the show, I don't know. I mean, it's clear there's, similarities, but like, I don't know. I think just by seeing like, okay, this cryptid or this character, Mothman or the Jersey Devil or so on and so on, they have glowing eyes or they have a lot of the similarities. I still feel like this is it's a very like, it belongs like in this specific time of like the, early to mid 1800s London, sort of the, like the Gotham by Gaslight,
Right.
that sort of era. I feel like anything that kind of continues on beyond that just doesn't quite feel like it belongs, I don't know. How do you feel about that? You feel the same?
Man, I agree. I think like I said kind of earlier, like I would be much more skeptical if this came out. Well, I mean, I don't know, dude. I mean, think about reading a report right now about some lunatic who's attacking a woman in, XYZ city. It would still be terrifying, man.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'd be skeptical in terms of like it being like some sort of like cryptid or something, or you know what I mean? Like I would be like, well, it's just some dude in like a crazy suit, but still, regardless, terrifying.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So that's it. That is the super famous Spring-Heeled Jack.
I'm glad we talked about it because I feel like we couldn't talk about the Mad Gasser of Mattoon without getting into Spring-Heeled Jack and sort of just thinking about those two characters separately or, together.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one thing too, I do think that just before we head off, I don't know, there is something interesting in like, the talk that we had about, possibility of something being like plasma with like the blue flame. I think that is interesting that he was able to like breathe blue flame. That's something that I feel like we didn't really touch on much, but jumping 30 feet in the air, breathing blue flame, that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, man.
And then the Mad Gasser also having like the blue flame, like, is that plasma? I don't know,
man. Another thing too, it's like, okay, so let's just be ultra skeptical here and say, wasn't anything, like cryptid or anything related. It was just some sort of technology that the person was using. Okay,
right.
Cool. Or maybe like it's an exaggeration. Okay, cool. But what in the world would have happened that would be confusing enough for a witness to say, look like they were, breathing blue flames and red eyes and jumping 30 feet up in the air, you know? Like
I don't.
There's nothing that's filling in the blank there for me. I don't know,
Well, and also, if you do want to sort of write everything off as like, oh, well, it was mass hallucination or it was mass hysteria or just a bunch of copycats or people making up stories, which, again, I'm sure happened a lot. But, like, even just taking those first two, the first woman that was sort of caught off guard and then the other woman who answered the door, even like if we're only taking those two accounts, both having the exact same similarities, the exact same story, like there had to be something. And, we say this a lot on the show is like, take away all the other stuff. Maybe everything else, like every other thing was totally just made up for attention or whatever, which I don't know. That's harder for me to believe back then. But I will say, like, newspapers trying to sell papers and
for sure.
What's
Headlines,
called,
right?
Yellow journalism or whatever. This idea of like, oh, we got to hype it up. We got to have all these just outlandish stories to sell papers. Like, I get it. That was definitely a part of the time. But even just those two accounts, man, there was something that like was the genesis of that,
Right. Yeah.
So,
man, incredible.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's super fascinating, super mysterious. It has all of the elements, the ingredients of everything we love here. The ingredients. It makes a great, that would be rad pizza, okay? So, I'm glad that you decided to bring that story in, man. So, I mean, I think that's a great place to sort of to wrap it up, man.
Yeah, me too, man. Where can we be found if folks want to find us?
If this is your first time listening, I got to say thank you, first off. Yeah. And thank you to all our listeners always. But the best place for you to interact with us, to kind of dive a little bit deeper into whatever the topic was that we talked about on our podcast, the best place to find us is on Instagram. You can find us at That Would Be Rad. Pretty easy to remember. And, we'll post extra pictures, dive deeper into these stories, but it's also a great place to just kind of ask us questions, send us stuff that you think is cool, all that kind of stuff. But if you have something a little bit more, long form, a story that's like super intriguing that has happened to you, a personal experience or, whatever, you can, of course, send it via direct message in Instagram, or you can also send it to where, Tyler?
To thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com. And yeah, like Woody was saying, if you've got a story, hell, maybe you've seen Spring-Heeled Jack, the modern variant of that. We would love to hear about it. If you don't feel comfortable telling your story, you know, like recording a voice memo or whatever, write it out and we'll put it to some cool sound design and music, and we'd love to tell your story also. Feel free to, if you get into the show or you're a longtime fan or brand new fan, hit up our link tree on Instagram. Go buy some merch. Go buy us a coffee. Whatever. It's all there if you're interested in that kind of thing. We have had a few people ask about a possible Patreon, and that is definitely in the works, but we're wanting to get a few more episodes under our belt, you know, just so we feel like we've kind of earned it, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
So that's coming, though, somewhere down the pike. I think that's about it. There was something else I was going to say, but I cannot remember. We haven't said this in a long time, but listen, again, if you're brand new, if you're a longtime fan, just get out there and tell one friend of yours. That's all that we ask. Tell a friend, pass it on, you know, whatever. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere, everywhere. Pass it on, and we appreciate it. As we always say, we thank you, we appreciate you, we love you, and as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes.
Clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead before you became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way it goes.
Okay.
Oh, man. Man.
Yeah, I don't know. How would you say the word man? Like, man. No.
Wait, how would you say man? Hold on.
Either man, Mayan.
Wait.
I think you have to like. There's like something in your mouth kind of thing, like Mayan.
Man.
Like it's almost like you're saying Mayan, like Mayan. No, that can't be right.
Good day there, Mayan.
That's why they say mate, I guess, because man's a hard one.
Man is hard.